My name is Michael Turpin. I have a couple of hats I wear in the Bitcoin space. I'm probably best known for starting an angel group called BitAngels. It's been around a little over 2.5 years, and also the Bitcoin Syndicate on AngelList, which is a U.S. angel crowdfunding platform, equity crowdfunding platform, which itself has a lot of legal changes in the last years that are of interest to people funding companies in the space. And I also run a PR firm called Transform Group that works with a lot of folks in the Bitcoin space. And I will let the rest of the panel detail their backgrounds.
My name is Marco Santori. I'm an attorney at Pillsbury Winthrop. I lead the digital currency and blockchain technology team there. It's a team of 24 now lawyers from different disciplines and different practices, all focusing on blockchain technology and digital currency. So everything from intellectual property to money transmission and financial services regulation to privacy and data security and tax. I represent companies in this space, startups, just like some of the people in this room, some of my clients are in this room, and also banks and financial services companies that are looking into using blockchain technology for their own enterprise uses.
Hi, everyone. Is this on? I'm Pamela Morgan. If you were here this morning, you already know my whole background, so I'm not going to bore you with that. For those of you that weren't here this morning, I'm an attorney. I have a firm called Empowered Law. I'm super selective on my clients. I only accept clients who I believe are doing something to better the world. I'm focused right now on educating lawyers in Bitcoin and the blockchain space. I also have a startup called Third Key Solutions, which is a key consulting and management company that focuses on backup and recovery.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Andrew Ittleman. I'm an attorney in Miami. The name of my firm is First Ittleman, David and Joseph. It's not futurist, although I kind of like that. So we may go with that. That's okay. I'm going to take it back to the management committee and see what they have to say about it. Anyway, I provide really comprehensive representation to a number of different highly regulated businesses. As it relates to you all, I've been representing money transmitting businesses going back about 10 or 11 years. I've been doing more and more work in the Bitcoin space over time. Again, I'm in Miami. My focus is on Latin America and the Caribbean, both in terms of U.S. entities moving into Latin America and the Caribbean, and then more importantly, advising Latin American and Caribbean businesses about the risks of doing businesses in the U.S. And so that can range from you intentionally want to come into the U.S. I'm going to tell you what the rules of the road are. At the same time, let's say you don't necessarily want to enter the U.S. because you don't want to trigger the jurisdiction of the U.S. government. I'll advise you on the sorts of things that you're going to need to avoid doing. So again, that's my focus, and it's enjoyable.
Great. So we're going to talk about a few issues and probably bring up a few more and ask the audience what they're thinking. Bitcoin is obviously, and the blockchain is a global phenomenon, and we're here in Latin America to talk about, Pan-American issues as well as global issues, as well as what's happening in the U.S. where all of us have our main practices that might affect the rest of the world. In 2013, it seemed like the big issues were how the heck is anyone going to tax this, and what is FinCEN going to say, and since then things have changed. This last year it was sort of what are states going to do to regulate. And also the blockchain. And when you have the blockchain instead of a cryptocurrency as your digital asset, it may or may not be treated as needing to be where 90% of the legal fees, I would say, are when you're using outside counsel, or 90% of your sweat and attention, which is regulation. So two-part question. Number one, what would you say has changed the most since we were here a year ago in Brazil, in terms of Bitcoin and regulation, and how it affects the legal components. And number two is the whole move toward the blockchain as a less regulated entity, something good, bad, ugly, and different? Marco.
You know, I think that the biggest change in the last year has been a perceptual change. The laws have been there. Companies have known they need to abide by the laws. This is no surprise. What we've seen is states and the federal regulators in the United States become and demonstrate that they're very serious about this. Recently, we had an enforcement action against Ripple, the very first civil enforcement action in the digital currency blockchain technology space was against Ripple for failing to abide by anti-money laundering regulations. And that was a market effort by FinCEN in the United States to demonstrate to everybody that there are consequences for doing these things. And if you're a startup, it's tempting to wait and to get the business running and get some customers and get a little bit of traction and then take care of the regulatory stuff. What the Ripple settlement taught us was that FinCEN and the Treasury and federal regulators in the United States will look back. And they'll look back into the things that you've done when you were a younger company. And whatever success you might have found, they're going to look at that. And they're going to see the work that you've done in the past, regardless of what you've done in the interim. So by way of background, just a few months ago, Ripple, I think we all have heard of this. It's not a competitor to blockchain. It's a Bitcoin. It's another kind of blockchain technology. They were fined $700,000 for anti-money laundering violations. And they were just a startup. And the government still came after them. So I think that's one of the examples. We've seen a lot of this. We've seen a lot in this vein. We've seen CFTC in the U.S. Enforce against commodities exchanges using Bitcoins. We've seen SEC enforce against just recently GAW miners and Garza for selling mining contracts that were really securities. This is 2015 has been the year that the feds have gotten really serious about enforcement. And I'm sure there was a second part to the question, but I've been talking for like half an hour.
That's
so,
fine.
Yeah.
Actually, you answered the second part. I mean, it was basically what the blockchain had sort of made. And I think we'll do some more on that because it was a long thing. I wanted to pick up on something you said before I find from the rest of the panel what they think the biggest change has been. The two actions that you had mentioned, Garza not only was selling a security, he was selling a Ponzi scheme. I mean, it says it right in the document that that's what they're accusing him of. Whereas with Ripple, I mean, it seems curious to me, and perhaps this is maybe a later question I can ask, or maybe a comment that could be done. It seems like whenever the big banks get, sort of accused of anti-money laundering, there actually is money laundered. Right? It's not hypothetical that maybe money might have been laundered. It's like $9 billion for this bank or that bank, and it's like, oh yeah, here's the drug money that came in and you weren't paying attention. And of course, nobody goes to jail and they pay a big multi-billion-dollar fine and everybody's friends again. Whereas it seems in a lot of the instances here where there's AML problems, it's sort of, well, you didn't go and disclose this. I think Bitcoin Jesus was part of this, that, and he's not exactly, some, like South American drug dealer. So I guess my part two, and then we'll move along to what everybody else says on this. I'm sure they'll comment. Is Bitcoin being treated with even more scrutiny in terms of AML, like in terms of theoretical than the banks, where it seems like you actually have to have some money laundered to get an action?
I think that people lose sight of what the regulators are there to do. The regulators know what they're there to do, and it's to enforce the law and make sure everybody knows they're enforcing the law. Those are two distinct missions. And when there's a new industry that starts to emerge, that starts to become a very serious player, they want to make sure that everybody knows that they're enforcing the law as to this industry. They see themselves as cops, not Bitcoin cops. They're cops regardless, and they want you to, and they want the public to know, especially in a new industry, that they're going to apply their laws to this industry too. And nobody gets a free pass, whether you're big or small, whether you've laundered $1 billion or $100,000. And that's a shame, because I think some of the young companies get a disproportionate effect of that.
I just wanted to address one thing that you mentioned about the whole concept that we have in the United States about these corporations being able to fall on the sword on behalf of their employees. That is something that is changing pretty quickly in the U.S. So in the U.S., there's been a ton of press about how between 2008 and 2012, you had this financial crisis that was caused, at least allegedly, by people who were engaged in fraudulent activities in Wall Street. I could get into more of the details, but I don't really need to. The point is that many people believe that there were many people with a lot of power and a lot of money who intentionally violated the law in the United States. And a lot of people are very upset about that. And there has been a change in the guard at the Justice Department since all of this went down. Eric Holder is no longer the Attorney General. There's a new Attorney General named Loretta Lynch. And she came in, and she's mad as hell about the reputation that the Justice Department now has as a result of letting all these people with all this money off the hook. And so Loretta Lynch comes in over the summer. A month later, she goes after FIFA, almost literally reaches her arm all the way across the Atlantic Ocean and into Switzerland to bust up this whole bribery scheme that has been going on untouched, unchecked for a couple of decades. And then very recently, or very soon after that, and this is all within the last few months, we have the Deputy Attorney General Yates issuing a memorandum to the Justice Department staff saying that going forward in Justice Department investigations in the United States, it's going to be the individuals who are addressed first. And we'll deal with the company later. But our first job as Justice Department personnel, as U.S. attorneys and assistant U.S. attorneys, is to find out who are the individuals who were culpable for the bad thing that happened. And that's who we're going after first. And so as far as big changes are concerned, in terms of the way that Bitcoin is regulated in the United States, everything that I'm describing, it doesn't really have anything to do with Bitcoin, and it has everything to do with Bitcoin. And so theoretically, in the past, if a company like a Ripple or like another Bitcoin-related company may have come under investigation by the Justice Department and felt that because HSBC and Wachovia and Bank of America and all these other major corporations were able to get away with profiting from all of this fraud, that they were going to be able to do it too, and the company would fall on the sword. Those days are probably over. The Justice Department has made very clear that, again, it is the individuals that they will be focusing on. Adding to that, the Justice Department has recently added a new position called Compliance Counsel. And the Justice Department has actually created a new job with a woman with a background in the pharmaceutical industry and with the banking industry. And her job is to be able to look at a compliance program, regardless of what industry it's in, and understand, is this a compliance program that's just on paper? Or is it something that's actually being implemented in the way that the company is operating? So having the compliance program and a loose leaf on your, in your office, or giving it to the guy in the basement, like, I don't know if you've ever seen Office Space, the guy with the red phone in the basement, letting him deal with that. That's not going to work anymore. The Justice Department is figuring out that these compliance programs are very important, and they are going to start the process of really drilling down into them and finding out what they were really all about. So I think that these two sorts of factors working together, all of this is very recent. As far as I'm concerned, makes compliance first, second, and third priority of any regulated business in the United States. Because again, if you're on the front lines of this highly regulated area, you're on the hook personally for bad things that happen. So as far as recent developments, I don't think there's anything more important than those.
And this is why innovation is moving out of the United States. So for those of you who are scared, for those of you who have listened to this is why true innovation is moving out of the US. Bitcoin allows us to have a global marketplace, and for the first time, other countries can compete with the United States. And that's what people are doing. People are hearing these and they're recognizing that the US is not friendly to businesses that are not interested in complying with all levels of regulation. And so those people who are truly innovating are tending to move outside of the U.S. At least that's been my experience.
So Pamela, let me play a little devil's advocate here. So when I walk in and I speak to regulators, which I do more often than I care to admit, why don't I sort of play the role of the regulator? You said, then this is why companies are moving outside of the U.S. The regulator says, good. That's exactly what we want. Goodbye.